Welcome everyone. This is Rabbi Yisrael Fried, Chabad of the West Side, and we're doing our weekly, what would normally be our drasha, our sermon, our Dvar Torah, Shabbos morning in Shul for these few weeks temporarily. That shuls are closed and our lives are really changed because of this corona. We'll be recording these Dvar Torahs before Shabbos, posting them on YouTube, and people can hear the Dvar Torah in advance of Shabbos. So we'll have a few thoughts on this week's Parsha and try to connect it with the present situation we find ourselves in, where our lives have really been turned upside down. Schools are closed, jobs are closed, we're working from home, we're, besides the health scare, and everyone should be healthy and everyone that needs a refuah shlema should have a refuah shlema, the upheaval of our day-to-day lives is really unnerving. But let's talk about that for a minute in terms of the parsha and see if we can learn some lessons out of that. Okay, so the parsha starts in an unusual way. The first part of the parsha is talking about the service of Yom Kippur in the temple, with the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, all the special sacrifices, offerings, the burning of the incense that he does on Yom Kippur in the temple, and a very special time. Part of that special, unique, once-in-a-year event of Yom Kippur is, as we know, that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was required, not just allowed, to go into the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was the most holy part of the temple in Jerusalem. And any other day of the year, no one was allowed in there, not even the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. On Yom Kippur, the Parsha tells us that the Kohen Gadol will go in there. As a matter of fact, these verses, the beginning of our Parsha, is actually the Torah reading on the first day of Yom Kippur, because it discusses all these special things the Kohen Gadol would do in the temple. So that's the... I'm not going to get into all the details. It's really fascinating. He had to wear special garments, linen. There were special sacrifices, all kinds of unique things that happened on Yom Kippur in the temple. But let's just leave it at that the Torah talks about the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And the Torah therefore starts with a special warning. Since going into the Holy of Holies is not a normal thing that happens, and there's a huge responsibility. In fact, if a person goes in at the wrong time, it could be he might die, God forbid, at the hands of heaven. That's what the Parsha says. The person might die. The Parsha begins with a kind of a warning in advance. And it says Hashem spoke to Moshe and gave over these rules about the Kohen Gadol going to the Acharei-Kedoshim, the Holy of Holies. And the Torah says, when was this command given over? When was the discussion about Yom Kippur in the temple and the Mishkan given over to the Jewish people in the desert? And that's the name of the Parsha. Acharei Moshe shnei bnei Aaron, after Aaron's two children died. So what was the story with Aaron's children that they died? Well, we had that in earlier parshas, and we'll have to try and dissect it and understand it for a moment now. But the story was that on the day of the dedication of the Mishkan, which was the Rosh Chodesh Nisan, almost exactly, I guess if it's almost, it's not exactly, 6 months before or after Yom Kippur, the Mishkan was dedicated 11 and a half months after the Jews got out of Egypt on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Aaron's children, Nadav and Avihu, says they brought a foreign fire, which has to be understood. And therefore Hashem punished, they died. So they, on a simple level, what the Parsha means is that Hashem said, hey, I'm telling you to be careful here about when and how you go into the Holy of Holies. It's after the death of Aaron's children, Nadav and Avihu. It's in the context of Nadav and Avihu. Look, they did something wrong. They brought a foreign fire. It's a huge responsibility. We're doing services in the Mishkan. If it's done wrong, somebody could die, God forbid. So you, Aaron, have to be careful how you do your things in the Holy of Holies, because remember, your own kids died when they did something incorrectly. That's the simple reading of the story. Be careful, don't die like they died. But let's try and understand this on a little bit of a deeper level and try and learn some lessons out of it. Because there's something very relevant for us, I believe, in this story. First of all, Nadav and Avihu, very holy Jews. They weren't your regular. They didn't just bring a foreign fire. They did something wrong in the rules of incense. They didn't follow the rules. They were righteous people. Moshe told Aaron to comfort him when they died. He said, hey, dedicating the Mishkan, I had a feeling, or I knew, Moses said, some tzaddik will have to die. Because the rule is, B'kroi v'yakadesh. Hashem says, I'm sanctified. My name is sanctified. When the people that are close to me and near me, God forbid, die. And Moshe thought, if it's tzaddik has to die, I figured it's going to be you or me. That's what Moshe said to his brother Aaron. And look, it was your kids. It turns out your kids are even holier than you and I are. So they were holy people. So what do you mean they brought a foreign fire? It's a lengthy discussion, but the answer in short, according to Hasidus, and actually it's even brought down in some commentaries on the Torah, like the Or HaChaim. Or HaChaim himself was a holy Moroccan. He lived in Morocco. He was a very holy person, and he lived before the time of the Baal Shem Tov, overlapping a little bit with the Baal Shem Tov. He often has very mystical, spiritual, Kabbalistic insights into his in his writings. You can see how he's, as a writer, he's leading into the time of the Baal Shem Tov and the Hasidic teachings. He also brings down this idea. So what was the foreign fire that Nadav and Avihu had? It wasn't something corrupt, dishonest, breaking a rule. The fire was a love for Hashem. That's a great thing. What was foreign about it? It was an unbridled, unlimited love for Hashem. A love for Hashem which took their souls so high that their souls desired to go even higher and be disconnected from the shackles and limitations of the body. Meaning a soul in heaven, or an angel in heaven certainly, obviously have a much higher, more lofty relationship with Hashem. And in this physical world, that's very confining. They say a story about a soul, when it comes down to this world, how it doesn't want to come to this world because it'll be disconnected and far from Hashem, and it wants to be close to Hashem in heaven. Of course, the idea of coming to this world, though it is a dark place which is far from Hashem, it's our mission is to be down here, and ultimately we'll be even closer to Hashem when Mashiach comes. But that's a given, that a relationship with Hashem is much less shackled in heaven without the limitations of the physical world and the physical body. And that there's even a term for that in Kabbalah called Kales HaNefesh. Kales HaNefesh means the expiring of the soul, and it means the yearning of the soul. Both things at the same time. It's yearning to go higher, to the point that it expires, it disconnects from the physical body. So Nadav and Avihu, you think, well, that's very lofty. They had such an unquenchable thirst and desire and love for Hashem that their bodies, that their souls disconnected from the bodies. Well, the problem with that is that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem doesn't want people to die. We have a mission. There's a reason Hashem sent our bodies, our souls, into our bodies in this world. Our mission is to make this physical world a godly, holy place. That's our mission. And we have to be aware of that. So these two different strivings of the soul have to work together, though sometimes they work against each other. In other words, a person can't just say, well, my mission is to be in this world, so I'll just do the mitzvahs in this world without any emotion, without any feelings. And that never works, because we can't be robots. The only way we work well is when we're inspired. We do something for those that we love, like Hashem. That's why we do the mitzvahs. It's not just a habit or a cultural thing. We'll do something Jewish because I connect with my grandparents who did that. That never works. And that certainly doesn't carry on to the next generation. There are many people that felt, well, we have to be Jewish on a certain level culturally. But their children didn't feel the same way. And that kind of weak or wishy-washy feeling towards Judaism doesn't carry on. What does carry on is a sincere love. Children realize what their parents are excited about and love, and that's what they do as well. So we need an excitement and a love for Hashem and for Judaism, but it has to be in the context of doing mitzvahs in this world. So we need both halves of this whole. It's called in Kabbalah Ratzai and Shoiv. Running, coming close to Hashem, having that love, that unquenchable love, like Nadav and Avihu did. But then a Shuv, or realizing that we have to come back towards this world and do our mitzvahs in this world. So Nadav and Avihu, we could say, missed that, maybe. They had the desire to run, but without Shuv, without returning. But let's take this one step further. Because it doesn't just mean that after we have this love for Hashem, we have to remember, well, our mission is we have to be part of this world. And we can't have an unlimited, unbridled love for Hashem. It means that the love for Hashem itself has to become in the context of doing what Hashem wants. In other words, when we're pursuing a love for Hashem, is it an expression of self-interest, albeit lofty, idealistic, spiritual interest? But is that our personal desire, or is it because Hashem wants us to have that love for Him? If it's option 2, then everything works together. The same God that wants us to have a great love for Him also wants us to be part of this world. If it's option 1, it's not really going to work. I have this love for Hashem because I enjoy it. Oh, I got to remember what Hashem wants. Hashem wants me to be part of this world. That doesn't always work together. Let's illustrate that with a story. The Gemara says that there were 4 holy people. One of them was Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud, who went to the Pardes. Pardes means orchard, but it also means they went on the spiritual excursion, otherworldly excursion of connecting with Hashem on these lofty, lofty levels. It didn't work for everybody. One person, it says, died. One person lost his mind. Dying is similar to Nadav and Avihu, that this great excursion into the Pardes, and it was a one-way trip. But Rabbi Akiva says came out b'shalom, peacefully. But interestingly, it doesn't just say he went into the Pardes and he made it out peacefully back to this world. He remained alive. It says, the wording is nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. He went in peacefully, came out peacefully. Or in other words, the reason he came out peacefully and in one piece intact and alive is because he went in peacefully. He went in with the right attitude. He went in thinking, I'm not going to pursue this great lofty experience for my personal spiritual high. I'm going to do it for Hashem. And when the perspective is always Hashem, we think of Hashem in terms of what He wants us to do, in terms of love, of ratzah, of running towards Him. And we think in terms of what He wants us to do, shuv, in terms of coming back down into this world. And that really connects with Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur, you could say, well, Yom Kippur is a time of great spiritual excitement, a time of a spiritual high, when we're really one with Hashem, when we're cut off from everything worldly. Kind of like the Kohen Gadol, who's one, he goes into the Holy of Holies, he's alone, it's just him and Hashem. We're all like that to a certain level on Yom Kippur. And that's a great spiritual experience. And many of us have experienced, all of us really, have experienced these great spiritual inspirational moments when we feel we're really in a high place. But the lesson of Nadav and Avihu is we have to think, how are we going to take that experience back into the real world? How are we not? It's not just enough on Yom Kippur. We've got this great, time when I'm feeling spiritual and feeling one with Hashem. That's great. But if we just leave it at that, that's not the mission. How can we continue and anchor and bring down that inspiration back into this world in the way we live our day-to-day lives, the days after Yom Kippur? It's interesting that the Rambam, in his laws of Yom Kippur, tells us that the Kohen Gadol, after he came home the night after Yom Kippur, he made a whole party, a celebration in his house. You could say part of that was to celebrate that he came out alive, because we said not everyone, Talmud says, went into the Holy of Holies, came out alive. So you have to make a party to celebrate that he survived. That's true. But part of the idea is saying that after Yom Kippur, and it's in the laws of Yom Kippur, part and parcel of Yom Kippur is thinking, how are we going to live the day after Yom Kippur? When we get back to our lives, how more spiritually are we going to be living our lives the day after Yom Kippur? We have to have the rutz of the excitement of running, that going to that spiritual place, but at the same time, a shuv, how are we going to return and be part of this world? Now let's talk about this in terms of how we're living our lives now. And everyone talks about, and this is important, it's a crazy time. Well, we're alone at home. We have to capitalize on this time. There's more time to learn Torah. There's more time to daven with kavana, with intention, because we don't have to be in shul. And there are all kinds of positives about this time. The time with our families, true. And we can always think and talk about how we can make the best out of these times of quarantine and shutdown and lockdown, and fine. But the lesson from the parsha is, perhaps, we have to ask ourselves, after life goes back to normal, after the businesses open up again, schools open up again, camps open up again, how are we going to take the lessons, the good lessons we learned in this time, and continue them on later? Now it's almost like we're locked in. We're like we're like in our own little world, just like every Jew is on Yom Kippur, just like the Kohen Gadol is on Yom Kippur. That's great. But on Yom Kippur, we have to be thinking about the day after Yom Kippur. When we're in the Pardes, this spiritual oasis, how are we going to go out peacefully and continue this spirituality like Rabbi Kiva when we come back to the real world? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Can we take some of this inspiration, some of the extra time we've learned Torah now, some of the extra things we've done with our family now, and continue them when we get back into what's quote-unquote the real world? Of course, the real intention, which is the intention of Yom Kippur, is that we shouldn't just want to be back to how life was, a few months ago before Purim, because that was what the life we were used to, but that wasn't really normal life either. Normal life is when there is no more suffering at all, when there's no disease anywhere, when there's no worrying, when there's no anxiety, when there's no depression. And that, of course, is the time of Mashiach. So ultimately, we'll have to think, how can we take the experience we have now and make our lives really worthwhile on the highest level? And with God's help, that will be with the coming of Mashiach, and let it be immediately. Everyone have a great night and a great Shabbos, and we should hopefully see each other soon in person, not just on Zoom. Have a great Shabbos.